Have you ever thought of someone as a hopeless case? Do you think of yourself as a hopeless case? Well, in the verses in front of us, we have two individuals who seem to be beyond all human hope. There was nothing anyone could do for them, but they had an encounter with Jesus, and that changed everything. Someone has described it as a tale of two daughters. We have Jairus' daughter, as well as a woman who's the only person Jesus refers to in the Gospels as daughter. So a tale of two daughters, two encounters with people whose situations seemed beyond human hope. And we're going to look at these two encounters under three headings, saying firstly that Jesus has power when all human hope is lost. Jesus has power when all human hope is lost. Here in verse 43, we're introduced to a woman who's had a discharge of blood for 12 years. It is a traumatic and deeply embarrassing personal problem, and that's bad enough, but it's not even all. It would have meant she was considered ritually unclean. It would have kept her away from the worship of God and taken away her ability to live a normal life in society. And what makes it particularly hopeless is not so much the nature of the problem, but how long it has dominated her life for. Despite all her efforts to find treatment, it's not just been going on for a few months, distressing as that would have been, but the months have turned to years. By this stage, she's been suffering for 12 long years. Can you remember what you were doing 12 years ago in the summer of 2014? Imagine if every single day since then your life had been dominated by a medical condition that no one could do anything about. And it's not for lack of trying. She has tried to find answers. And maybe there's some here, and you have known a medical problem that has been very hard to get a diagnosis of before you can even start treatment. And you've just longed that someone could tell you what it is, that someone could say this is what it is, so that you could at least start getting treatment for it. And in the ancient world, women's medical problems were treated particularly incompetently, and so verse 43 isn't much of a surprise. Even though she had spent all that she had, it hadn't done her any good. She hadn't just gone for a second opinion or a third opinion, but a 10th and a 20th, to no avail. And so hers is an absolutely desperate and hopeless case. And she actually serves as a picture of all of us, whether we've had long-running health problems or not. Because this woman is also a picture of the misery that sin has brought into the world. There's no suggestion that she was suffering because of some sin on her part. But it's also true that all pain and all disease in the world is in the ultimate sense a result of sin. The sin of Adam and Eve way back in the Garden of Eden. God didn't create us to suffer. All the misery we face in life is because sin has come into the world and spoiled God's perfect creation. We should never look on death and disease as normal, because it was never meant to be this way. Every trip to the doctor, every hospital visit should be a reminder that this isn't the way God intended the world to be. Sin will come to you this week with its mask on, saying that it will bring you pleasure. But underneath the mask is something that wants to destroy your life, just as it was for this woman. And maybe you're here today and you're in a similar position to her because you have tried everything else and it hasn't worked. She had tried every option that the world offered to try and find healing. And maybe you have tried every human solution, and perhaps some spiritual ones too, to try and find meaning and satisfaction in life. Perhaps you spent money or energy on things that you've hoped will bring pleasure and contentment, but you still feel empty inside. You've gone around all the different things that the world says will bring you happiness. But the years keep going by and you can't find anything that really satisfies. And maybe you seem fine on the outside. Those in the crowd that day probably couldn't have guessed from just looking at this woman that there's anything wrong with her. And maybe people looking at your life would never guess that there was a hidden emptiness inside. Outwardly, things may seem fine, but inside there's a secret emptiness, maybe a secret guilt that you carry through life. But Jesus can bring healing when all human hope is lost. All this woman has to do is touch his clothes, and immediately the flow of blood stopped. She has suffered week after week, month after month, year after year of hopelessness, and Jesus heals her on the spot. Do you know hopelessness this morning? Does that describe your situation? She meets Jesus and everything changes. And what a contrast to all the human remedies she's tried. So much effort, so much money spent, and none have been able to make her better. But one touch from Jesus and she's healed. And what about you this morning? Are you still chasing after meaning and satisfaction in something other than Jesus Christ? This woman's testimony is that no matter how long you keep looking, you'll be disappointed until you come to Jesus. And anyone can come to him. Anyone can come to him. And if you do come to him today, you will find that he brings the healing and the meaning that you've been looking for all your life. Jesus has power when all human hope is lost. But then secondly, this morning, we see that Jesus has power over death itself. Jesus has power over death itself. The woman with the flow of blood has been suffering the longest, and yet her case is not the most desperate of the two. Jesus was touched by the hemorrhaging woman while he was on his way to the synagogue to see the daughter of a synagogue ruler named Jairus. As a synagogue ruler, Jairus would have heard Jesus teaching there. He would have been a respectable member of society. And yet in verse 41, we find him doing something which respectable men in that society, or indeed in most societies, wouldn't have done. He falls at Jesus' feet. And why does he do such a drastic thing? Because his little daughter was dying. A few griefs, J.C. Ryle comments, are so crushing and heavy as the grief of a parent over an only child. And Jairus was staring that in the face. Alexander Smiley was a Stranraer man who knew what it was to lose a daughter. He was born in Stranraer in 1857. He came back to be ordained in one of the churches here when he was 23. And sometime later, he and his wife lost their little girl. He dedicated his most famous book, Men of the Covenant, to her memory, describing her as a child whom God leads in green pastures and beside still waters. What parent would not do anything they could to prevent that happening? And in his desperation, Jairus goes to Jesus. Jesus starts to go with him, but the people are pressing in around him. And And then Jesus stops to talk to the woman who's just been healed. And just as he finishes speaking to her, messengers come from Jairus' house with the heartless words of verse 49. Your daughter is dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore. What devastating news for anyone to hear, and how bluntly delivered. But Jesus overhears what they say and tells Jairus not to fear, only to believe. When they get to the house, there's a commotion going on. The professional mourners have arrived. Now, we don't have professional mourners in our country, but they did. These were people who would be paid to come and weep and wail following a death. According to one rabbi who lived a century after Jesus, even the poorest person was expected to hire at least 2 flute players and 1 wailing woman. And so when Jesus comes into the house and tells them that the girl isn't dead but sleeping, they laugh in his face. These weren't distraught family members. They were hardened professional mourners who had seen countless deaths. They knew when someone was dead. Why does Jesus say that she's sleeping? Well, he often talked about death in this way. And in this case, he knew that the little girl, he knew he was going to bring her back. She might as well have been sleeping. She was only sleeping to him, even though she was dead to them. But she was dead, and if Jesus hadn't come, she would have stayed dead. But taking his 3 most trusted disciples with him, along with Jairus and Jairus' wife, he goes into the room, he takes her hand, and he says, "Child, arise." And at that, her spirit returned, she got up, and he told them to give her something to eat. Raising someone from the dead is in many ways the ultimate miracle. Jesus only does it 2 other times, at least 2 other times recorded for us in the Gospels. And I think if we were making this up, there would be a dramatic climax. But instead, the girl just gets up and starts walking around as any 12-year-old would do. Her parents are so amazed that they never have the thought that she might be hungry. But Jesus tells them to give her something to eat. Life just goes back to normal. And in fact, the very ordinariness of the account shows that this isn't something that someone has dreamed up. Jesus is confronted with death itself, and even it is no barrier to him. And Christian, a brother or sister today, this is the Saviour that you have. We've seen in recent weeks Jesus' power over nature when he calms a storm. We've seen his power over demons when he frees legion. And here we see his power over incurable disease and death itself. Jesus takes Peter, James and John with him at the times he wants to show them something of special significance. He does it here. He'll do it in the next chapter when he's transfigured. And he'll also take them with him when he prays in the Garden of Gethsemane as the cross approaches. So this is one of those moments where we see Jesus' glory in a special way, as he shows his power even over death. Are you finding the Christian life hard? Are you wondering if it's worth keeping going? Like many of the first readers of Luke's Gospel no doubt were, as persecution came. Well, this is the Saviour you have. Power over nature, power over evil spirits, power over death and disease. Are you resisting becoming a Christian? Does it seem that you have to give up too much? Only Jesus can give true meaning to your life now. And only he has the power to keep holding on to you as you face death itself. Death is something we'd rather not talk about, but for the Christian, it is a defeated enemy. As someone has said, the D word doesn't have to have the final word. The D word doesn't have to have the final word. Death has perhaps mown down many that you've known and loved. But it doesn't have to have the last laugh in your life. If you trust in Jesus, you can meet death, knowing that its sting has been removed. Jesus rescuing someone from physical death also points to his power to rescue them from spiritual death. Are you here this morning and you think you're beyond God's help? Maybe because of what you've done in the past, or because of all the times you've rejected him. Well, you're right that your condition's serious. The Bible says that you're spiritually dead. But the call of Jesus here is so powerful that it reaches even to the dead. So you're not beyond Jesus' reach. And he is calling you today, if you haven't yet trusted in him. Maybe even some of the boys and girls. Child, arise. Young man, young woman, arise. Middle-aged person, arise. You who've lived out most of your years but never actually been born again, arise and put your trust in him and accept the new life that he offers. He's calling you today. How should you respond? Well, that brings us to our final point. We've seen Jesus' power when all human hope is lost. We've seen Jesus' power over death itself. Thirdly, we see the need for faith to experience Jesus' power. The need for faith to experience Jesus' power. In some ways, the two healings that we've seen today raise nearly as many questions as they answer. If Jairus' daughter is at the point of death, why doesn't Jesus go to her first rather than heal a woman who's already been sick for 12 years and could surely wait another half an hour? Or when the woman touches him, why does he call attention to it and get her to tell everyone the whole story about her very embarrassing personal illness? If Jesus was just a miracle worker, these things would make no sense. There would be no need for any of it. He could just do his healings and move on. But Jesus was interested in more than just healing these two. He wanted to see them and those around them grow in their faith. Now, both Jairus and the hemorrhaging woman already seem to have some level of faith. Neither of them would have come to Jesus if they hadn't. But Jesus wants to see their mustard seed-sized faith grow. And nice as it would be, our faith in Jesus doesn't tend to grow much when everything is going well. Did you realize that? It would be nice, wouldn't it, if our faith in Jesus would just increase without any suffering or trials coming into our lives. But just as your muscles won't develop if they're not used, so our faith only grows when we put it into practice. When we trust in God, even when we don't know what's going on. It's been well said that faith grows best in the furnace of affliction. Faith grows best in the furnace of affliction. And so there may be a number of reasons why Jesus stops to speak to this woman while Jairus' daughter lies at the point of death. But one thing it does teach Jairus is the need to trust in Jesus' timing. You can imagine Jairus' relief as Jesus starts coming back to him, but then the anxiety flooding back as he stops to talk to someone in the crowd. And then just when it seems that the woman's problem has been dealt with, the messengers come with the news that Jairus feared above all else. Your daughter is dead. Yet Jesus responds, do not fear, only believe. And perhaps there's someone here this morning who particularly needs to hear those words. Do not fear, only believe. Jairus did believe in Jesus, but his little fledgling faith was in danger of being snuffed out. The circumstances of life were in danger of overwhelming him. Maybe that sounds familiar. You feel in danger of being overwhelmed by the circumstances of life. So Jesus' timing is strange, but it's intended to increase the Father's faith. And sometimes you won't understand Jesus' timing either. Maybe you're hit by one set of bad news, quickly followed by another. Maybe you think, why now, Lord? I just can't cope with this. But he says to you, do not fear, only believe. And as a result, Jairus becomes a witness not just to a miraculous healing, but to a resurrection. And so Jesus' strange delay increases Jairus' faith. But why then does he make the woman do the one thing that she doesn't want to do, which is to reveal her hidden shame? Well, as someone has put it, he's not content to dispatch a miracle, he wants to encounter a person. Occasionally we have people phone up the church wanting financial help. Maybe they're out of gas or electric, or they've suddenly found themselves out of work, or some other crisis has struck. There was a guy who phoned up fairly recently and he just wanted a Tesco gift card sent to an email address. He didn't want to meet up first. But not only does meeting up with someone verify that they're actually someone local and not just someone phoning up random churches, but Jesus always wanted to encounter the person and not just dispatch a miracle. And surely we should be the same. And yet sometimes all we want is a miracle. Maybe all you want from God is that he would heal your illness or improve your family situation or end your addiction. And if he gave you that, you'd be happy, but you wouldn't have a deeper relationship with him. But Jesus is far more interested in a relationship with you than giving you simply what you want. True Christian discipleship isn't about Jesus meeting our needs. It's about knowing him and following him. This woman obviously had some amount of faith in Jesus. After all, he tells her, verse 48, your faith has made you well. By finding Jesus and touching his clothes, she's put the little that she knows about him into action. But he wants more than that for her. He wants her to realize that there isn't something magic about touching him, but that her faith had healed her. Above all, he wants her to encounter himself. So what about you? Are you interested in Jesus, or are you just interested in what he can do for you? Maybe you started coming to church because you were interested in what you thought God could do for you. Maybe the reason that you keep coming to church is because you don't want to fall back into your old pattern of living. But is Jesus the one that you're really interested in? Because he doesn't just want to change your life outwardly. He wants you to encounter him. Someone has said that many press in on Jesus by going to church, but few actually reach out and touch him in faith. Many press in on Jesus, many are associated with Jesus, but few reach out and touch him in faith. But if you do come to Jesus in faith, however weak it is, what sort of reaction can you expect? Well, what comes across again and again in this section is the tenderness of Jesus. The tenderness of Jesus. To stop and talk to a woman, never mind one with the problem she had, it's not the sort of thing that respectable religious men in Jesus' day would have done. She's ceremonially unclean. But not only does he talk to her, not only does he invite her to tell her story, he also calls her daughter, which is a word he doesn't use to address anyone else in the Gospels. And we see the same care with Jairus, telling him not to be afraid when he's just been told that his daughter is dead and his world is about to fall apart. And then look at Jesus' tenderness with the little girl in verse 54. He takes her by the hand. Did he need to? No, he calmed the storm just by speaking a word. Jesus healed plenty of people at other times just by speaking. To touch a dead body would have made him ritually unclean. And yet Jesus takes her by the hand. He's as gentle as a father waking his little daughter in the morning. And when she comes back to life, he's concerned that in her joy, her parents don't forget to give her something to eat. And Jesus is still the same today. Maybe you're facing a lot at the moment. Perhaps you're feeling overwhelmed. Well, Jesus still has the same power today that we see here. And he's still just as tender and loving to those who come to him in faith. To those who come because they've realized that all other solutions for all their promise are ultimately hopeless. To those who come not just to see what they can get from Jesus, but who want a real relationship with him. Yes, he will ask you to do things that you don't find comfortable, but you can be sure that what he's asking you to do is for your ultimate good. And if you want to be sure this morning how much Jesus cares for you, well, yes, look at him here, holding this dead girl by the hand, surrounded by Peter and James and John. But then let your mind move to another time when he took 3 friends, not to a room, but to a garden. Mark 14 tells us that when Jesus went to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane, he took with him Peter, James, and John, and he began to be greatly distressed and troubled. And why was he greatly distressed and troubled? Because he was about to go to the cross, so that diseased and dying sinners like us could know perfect fellowship with him for all eternity. None of us can escape the ravages of sin, that humanly incurable disease. All of us will one day face death. Human solutions may numb the pain and the reality of it for a while, but only the power of God can deliver us. And we see both his power and love here as he heals this woman and raises Jairus' daughter. But above all, we see it at the cross. His death and resurrection is the only hope for a diseased and dying world. Amen. Well, let's respond to what we've heard by singing praise in the words of a psalm which speaks both of the tenderness of Jesus, the hopelessness of what the world offers, and the power of the one who raises the dead. It's Psalm 17 on page 25. Psalm 17 from page 25, starting with verses 6 and 7. Verses 6 and 7 on page 24, and then from verse 11 to the end on page 25. So 6 and 7 on page 24, and then 11 to the end. In verse 7, we see God's care for his people. Keep me as the apple of your eye. That is the same care that Jesus has for his people. Then in verses 11 and 12, we see pictured for us the emptiness of all this world has to offer. Jairus was so glad to get his daughter back. But verse 12 speaks of those who are simply satisfied with children and don't look for anything beyond that. Those who would say, well, family is everything, and they leave God out of the picture. Then finally in verse 13 we sing of the little girl's experience, awaking from death in the presence of Jesus. But as for me in righteousness, I your own face will see. She woke from death and she saw the face of Jesus. One day that will be your story too, if you're trusting in him or if you put your trust in him today. So verses 6 and 7 and 11 to the end. Tune 137. If you're able, we'll stand to sing praise.